This is something I actually want to ask you that I'm sorry I didn't write down actually. But you grew did you grow up in South Carolina or were you just born there? Or is that entirely wrong?
Keep it quiet. No, no, I grew up. I grew up in South Carolina. Yes, I did.
Right. I don't know when they stopped doing this, but was this like maybe in the 50s or 60s they were still doing the traveling wrestling shows with, the circuses all coming through town? Or was that more to 20s and 30s?
Well, it was early in the Carnival days, and I don't remember it. I don't remember it when I was growing up that they were called at shows. Now, some of the old timers used to tell me about the at shows because they would go into and how it would work. It's a carnival, and they would have a guy come out there, and they would have a little ring, and he would challenge anybody in the town. And what they were working for is they would build this little program because they would have a guy he wasn't from the town, he wasn't even from the county, he was a plant, and he was a real buff guy, and they would never pick him. Say they were there they'd start on a Tuesday usually because the Sundays were to set up and Mondays was to rest, and they would usually start the week long carnival on about a Tuesday, and they would build this program all week, and they would pick other guys, but they would never pick the real buff guy. And people said, "Why don't you pick him? Why don't you pick him?" And they were running from this guy. That's what it looked like. They didn't want to. They didn't think they could beat him. So finally, when it got to the last night there, Friday night or Saturday night, they would take bets, and everybody would bet on the big buff guy, and they would bet, their bets. They were doing the betting anyway. I mean, you would giving your money to the carnival people, and you were betting on the big buff guy, and he'd go in there, and after about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, he'd get beat. Of course, they knew that going in, they couldn't lose. So, and a guy who made that famous was a guy I took my name from, Dutch Mantell. And I was given that name by an old promoter named Buddy Fuller because he said I kind of looked like him. I don't know how, but but what he used to do, he used to travel, and he worked in the carnies, and he was from Europe. I think he was actually from Holland, but he was a shooter, and he used to pull up to these carnivals in an old beat up car, but he didn't drive an old beat up car. His car was like a Rolls Royce. That's how much money he would make. And he would work these carnivals because nobody could beat him. He was what they called he was a hooker, not a hooker on the street hooker, but, when he'd hook you. And they had a way that they could hook you a certain way. They could actually pull your arm out of socket. I mean, these guys told me this. I said, damn, he was just tough. There was a place in England that was famous. It was called Wigan. You know where Wigan is?
It's in Greater Manchester where I live, so yes, I do.
Is that still the history about it, Wigan?
I think they've got a version of the Snake Pit gym there still, but it's not the same as it used to be decades ago.
Yeah, but you've heard the stories,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Okay, it was called Wigan, and that's where all the shooters came from, and I met a lot of them. Remember, I said the guys that all of a sudden they showed up in the U.S. from the U.K. because business went to crap over there. They would talk about Wigan and how they would go in there and train, and it was like the UK version of the dungeon in, I guess, Stu Hart's old territory.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this guy named Dutch Mantell would go in there, and I don't know, this was like in the 30s, maybe 40s, maybe, and he'd cover all the bets. So when he would leave, he might leave with $1,500, which sounds just ordinary now, but $1,500 back in the 30s, you were rich. Mm. And he was riding out of town every week with maybe $2,500 to $3,000 in his pockets, which wasn't bad. But that's what the carnivals, that's what they were famous for.